Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers here to talk Seahawks football. We're going to talk cornerbacks today as part of our ongoing NFL draft prospect series. We've reached the cornerbacks. Next show, we're going to finish up with the safety class, and we're going to talk about some rule changes and stuff up front. And it should be a fun show. Lots of information as per the norm. Welcome in, Keith. How you doing?
Doing good today. Let's just jump straight into the rule changes. There's three significant changes. One is a safety concern. The league decided to outlaw. Basically, it's the tackle that hurt Geno's knee in week 4 and caused him to gimp around for a couple of weeks after that. This last year, and it's where guys will drop their own weight down trying to tackle someone from behind, and in doing so land on the legs of the person they're tackling,
or pull a muscle of the other player.
Yeah,
I mean it's a significant kind of shock to your system to be tackled like that. It's just kind of it can cripple you.
So according to the league, when they went through and reviewed every play, they said that it happens about once a game, and it injures a player about once every 2 games, meaning that half of the times those tackles happen, a player has missed significant time. That I can understand why they're trying to eliminate it, but at the same time, they're also making, it's just another rule. It's making it really hard to play defense. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you're either in a position to make a good solid tackle or you're not. Now, a hip drop tackle is when you've kind of lost your leverage a little bit and you're kind of reaching as a defensive player and so forth. So hopefully they can kind of correct that with just proper technique and being in a position to make the play in the first place. So, But anytime you're chasing somebody from behind, you've got makeup speed and you can reach a player. Now you're going to be tackling for, ankles, knees, shoulders. So you may not be grabbing them around the waist and dropping them, but you could be injuring them in some other way. Anytime you tackle somebody from behind, I think you might be set up to be injured.
So second rule change, as I say, the second rule change is that's a simple one, is just with challenges. It used to be if you used both of your challenges in a game and you succeeded on both of them, you would get a third challenge. Now they're going to give the third challenge to a coach that just succeeds on one of the two.
Man, Pete Carroll out of the league before his time.
I think that's why they waited to do this. They're like, Pete's gone. All right, we can finally push this one through.
That's funny.
And then the last one's really significant because it's going to look very, very different.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I haven't really looked at this too much, but I did see coverage of it. Did read the rules, briefly, and saw that there's going to be more kickoffs returns now, and that position is going to reestablish itself as important to teams. Now, we've spent the last couple of years really not having too many players that can return kicks, at least in a dynamic way. We had DJ Dallas and, D. Eskridge had a couple before he was hurt. And, there had been other players like Iwabuaki, I think was the last guy that could actually do a decent job at it, but they didn't let him go, didn't bring him back the following year, even though he was amazing, just because it really wasn't that important. So
yeah, most kicks were going through the end zone, and the fact that you could call a fair catch in the end zone and take the ball at the 25, teams were doing that, and there wasn't a lot of incentive for the kicking team not to just pound it through the end zone. And instead they want to have the kick returns, but they also want them to be safe. And so, first of all, everybody but the returners have to be within 5 yards of the kick on both teams. So you're going to see 9 guys on the receiving team up next to the ball and within 5 yards.
And no player except the kicker or the returners can move until the ball is received by the returner, which is like huge.
God, that's going to be huge because that's going to give them a running start.
Yeah. So kicking and returning are going to be premier positions in this league.
Yeah, because Yep. And they've set up rules that basically there's now a landing zone between, it's just the red zone. The ball's gotta land between the goal line and the 20, which is what they want. They want the kick to be returned. If it goes just into the end zone, it's like you kicked it out of bounds. The opposing team gets the ball at the 40. And yeah, I mean, it's they want the ball dropped into that area so that a guy can run it back, and you're going to see some big returns this year because the defensive coverage team's not going to have that running start. They're not going to be all already down at the 30-yard line before the guy catches it. They're going to be basically being picked up as far as being blocked immediately because they're within 5 yards of the opposing team, and they're going to have to get themselves up to speed and run down there and maintain their gap assignments and lanes and all of that. They're really giving the advantage to the returner.
Yeah. So. And if they don't happen to return, if it's touchback, the ball comes out to the 30-yard line now instead of the 25. It used to be the 20. Now, the last 4 or 5 years, it was the 25. Now it's going to be the 30. And, what that does and what this combo does is it's going to be more points on the board, essentially, over the course of the season. It doesn't have to be every play, but over the course of the season, offenses are going to have a little bit of a head start compared to where they used to be. And every 5 yards, adds a certain percentage of points throughout the season. So what are they doing for the defenses, Keith?
Nothing.
Yeah, it's been that way for a long time. Like rules to benefit offenses and things like that have just been added on and added on and added on, and nothing really for the defense at all to create an advantage. And that somehow has got to reverse itself, I think.
I don't know. I think they are they're wanting points. They're wanting because it's more entertaining. It's higher ratings, and that's what they want. I think this, like, remember when they moved the PAT, the point after attempt, back from being at like the 2-yard line to moving it back. What is it, the 15 or something now, and making it a meaningful thing. And it's made, like, guys miss it now. Nobody ever missed a PAT under the old system, and now they do. And so now it has a meaningful outcome on games, because it was automatic. It was, why even run out there and do it?
Why?
It was kind of the thought.
Correct.
The opposing teams, the defensive team in those situations were basically standing there. They weren't even trying because you can't get to it and it doesn't matter. They were going to make it anyway. So it became a lot of movement and waste of time, making games longer for no reason. And so they backed it up. The choices were either to eliminate it or back it up and make it a meaningful thing, and they chose to back it up. Kickoffs have been becoming the same way.
Apparently, there's an onside kick rule too. That's part of this. Is NFL teams will only be able to declare they want to pursue an onside kick in the fourth quarter of games. They can do it twice as well. So if you're trailing and you want to do an onside kick, you can go ahead and do that. I didn't know that it was optional before. Like, I just assumed you could kick an onside kick in the first kickoff in the game if you wanted to.
You can.
Um,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what this declaring thing is.
Well, the reason why they're saying that you have to declare it now is because they're setting up this new rule as far as the kickoffs go. They want to give both teams a shot at it, because since the guys have to be within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, but the ball has to go 10 yards to become live. They want to have a different set of rules for if it's going to be an onside kick. So that way guys can line up in a better spot. Yeah. So it takes away the surprise. It takes away the, the random third, quarter onside kick that you'll see a team do for here and there, just trying to steal an extra possession or something like that. You can't do that anymore, and you can only do 2. I didn't really like that it was only 2. I think that if you're going to say, we can only do it in the fourth quarter, if a team is down by a lot and they happen to score 3 touchdowns and fight their way back into it, why are you stopping them from, taking a chance to go get another onside kick and making a game of it? You may have dug yourself a hole, but you've dug yourself out of it. So you should be able to have that benefit. So I don't know. We'll see.
So today we're talking about corners. The next show we're talking about safeties. Couple of really important position groups, I think, to Mike McDonald's defense. Especially when you go take a look at Kyle Hamilton and the role that he played at the Ravens defense. I mean, he was just all over the place making plays. And I see the similar role for like Devin Witherspoon. Just a smart player, physical, can come up and do things. He's not nearly as big, 220 pounds as Hamilton, being around 195 or something like that. But he's the same sort of instinctual player, the same sort of leader guy, physical, exerts his will onto a team. So I could see that happen. But there are other prospects, available in the draft, both at corner and safety, that I think the Seahawks would still be interested in. You take a look at the rooms that we've currently got constructed on the roster, and especially at corner, you just look at it and think, well, there's just not any room for even one prospect, let alone a high draft pick or whatever. And that's not the way the draft works typically. John Schneider's working on a 3-year plan. He's definitely looking at next year. He wants to know, what his moves are, what his contracts look like, the quality of the players on the field and so forth. So it's not out of the question that Seattle doesn't draft somebody in the first round or the second or third, depending on where we move around a little bit. And I find that just a little interesting. And I was thinking about, how we dismissed a little bit of the edge rushers, for example, of needing somebody high, or we did kind of the same thing with the, offensive tackles and so forth. And it's easy to do that. But I think when you really get down to it, in John Schneider's in the draft room, they're taking a look at best player available. They're looking at a whole bunch of different combinations as far as contracts. They're looking at, how they measure players in the draft versus the players that are on the roster, and so on and so forth. So for me, there's like 6 or 7 different position groups that the Seahawks could really draft for in the first 2 or 3 rounds. And it's really just going to depend on how the draft falls and where those levels are in the draft, where talent falls off and where they feel like they need to go and get somebody. So it's an interesting conversation to me. How did you want to approach this?
I would say with corner specifically, if they do take, they won't take a corner at 16. I think that.
See, there you go.
Like
I know you can talk yourself into it pretty easy.
They won't. But the thing is that that doesn't mean they won't take a corner. Because
I agree with at least that. Now I could see the scenario where they could, depending on how they view Tariq Woolen, for example, or Trey Brown. Maybe Woolen, they saw enough on tape last year where he just wasn't the player that he was supposed to be, and maybe they move on from him. At least as far as maybe looking for a player in the draft that could come in immediately and have an impact. I don't know.
I don't know.
It doesn't seem like it's the priority, right?
He was a Pro Bowler the year before. You don't move on. Yeah,
I think
no.
he's going to thrive in this new defense personally.
He is.
But
I agree. I think he's going to absolutely thrive. And basically, you've got your starters. You've got Trey Brown. You've got Mike Jackson. You've got Artie Burns. I mean, you're looking at having being 5 deep, but that doesn't mean you don't take one. Because if a guy that you have, sitting there with a round 2 grade is sitting there at the end of round 3 where you have a pick, you take him, and then you go, okay, now I've got a guy like Mike Jackson that's tradable, or Kobe Bryant, or Artie Burns. One of these guys ends up tradable, and so you can maybe you wait until training camp, but just in case someone gets hurt or that kind of thing, you don't want to lose all your depth. But if everyone makes the camp, you trade somebody and you pick up another pick for the following draft. And you got younger and you got cheaper in the process.
This draft is interesting because there's so many other talented position groups that I think some of these guys that we're going to talk about end up getting pushed down a little bit. And, if Seattle trades back and picks up a few additional day 2 picks, a lot of these guys could come into play just because you're looking for speed, you're looking for athleticism. And it is a very important position to be able to be diverse. And that's the only reason why I'm thinking Woolen might not fit what they're trying to do long term, is because Mike McDonald's corners and safeties can play multiple spots, and they can play interchangeability on different types of defenses: cover 2, Tampa 2, cover 3, drop zone, etc. A lot of their players are interchangeable, and Tariq Woolen doesn't seem to be that guy. He seems to be a guy that's just strictly an outside corner, either press or zone. He's better at press, I think, than zone currently, but they can probably make him better in zone. What are your thoughts around that?
I think that he is a 5th round pick going into year 3, and you don't get Pro Bowl level talent on that small of a contract very often, and you take advantage of it when you have it because it's a salary cap league. And even if they say, no, we want people who are more versatile, more Julian Love like, I think you grow Tariq Woolen into that. He's big, he's athletic, he's got everything. You can teach him. You don't just be like, oh, that's not who he is, let's move on. Especially not on someone with that much talent at that low of a contract. So to me, it's more, a guy like Mike Jackson, who's good, in zone coverage, and he's a great tackler for a corner, but he's not great in man coverage, and he certainly isn't going to be a guy that you want to, being to drop back and playing like a center field type safety in a rotation. You know what I mean? Like if the because you're looking for versatile guys so you can make things difficult on the opposing quarterback, and you don't want him in that role. So he's more of a guy, especially since he's on a restricted free agent deal. So he's going to cost probably more than your 4th corner should. He's the type of guy that I think is more where he could, his days in Seattle could be numbered because of the lack of flexibility. But I think Woolen is he's got the speed, he's got the size. I think he's just a different beast. And with that contract, you gotta try. You can't just be like, no, he's not going to work.
No, I agree. I just don't know. You come in with a new scheme and a new coaching staff and new eyes and all that, even though Carl Scott's still going to be the defensive backs coach. I just think it opens up a little bit of questions as far as how the team is going to view its own players. And you've got a draft coming up, and it's just an opportunity maybe to move some chess pieces around a little bit. Maybe I'm not saying they're going to do a draft day trade or anything crazy like that. And this position is probably taken care of, to be completely honest. That's That's probably the most likely situation. But teams always trying to improve. If they have a chance to maybe Turian Arnold and they view him, or Quinnan Mitchell, they viewed him as top 10 talent and they're dropped to 16. What do? He's the best player on the board. I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying maybe that's the way they view it. And they could make a surprise move. It's happened before. How do you view the top end of the class? Let's say the first round or second round guys on this list, Keith.
I think there's 5 first round guys. Here, you said Turian Arnold. I think at 4.50, he's maybe a little slow, especially since 6 foot 190, 189.
The cool thing about him though is he's got that diversity thing going for him.
I know, because he can play safety and stuff. But when you look at like Quinlan Mitchell, he's got Arnold by 7 pounds. He's also a 4.33 guy. He's longer. But he
also played
faster.
for Toledo versus Alabama, if that matters.
It doesn't. Bobby Wagner played for Idaho State.
He didn't play for Idaho State. He played for Utah State.
I know. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no. Quinny and Mitchell, man, he's the real deal. He kind of reminds me of Witherspoon. If I'm being completely honest, you take a look at them, the way that they can move, the way that they play the ball, the vision, the leadership, the tenacity and tackling and all that kind of the ball skills. I just think that, if they wanted to, Witherspoon's on the roster and he's sitting there at 16, man, it'd be hard not to pull the trigger for me. But I could say that with like 6 or 7 different players that could potentially fall to 16, especially if 4 or 5 quarterbacks go before Seattle picks. That's going to force some really big time talent down the board a little bit. So, okay.
Yeah. I mean, Nate Wiggins is a guy that's going to get a lot of press because of his 4.28 time. And the 40, he's also 6'1", so he's a little taller, a little longer. But man, he's only a 173. It is not a guy that I am feeling great about holding up to the NFL level of contact and all that kind of stuff.
He needs to get into the kitchen.
Yeah, he does.
But he's only 20 years old.
Yeah,
he literally just turned 20 too. He'll be 21, I think, by the first game. So
he's young guy. Yeah. Cooper DeJean is a guy I kind of like at 6 foot 203. He's also a 4.5 guy like Turian Arnold. He's just bigger. He's built a little bigger. He's a guy that I think Pete Carroll would have loved because he tackles well and he's good in zone coverage, but I don't think he's multiple enough for McDonald's version of this defense. But still, I mean,
we're going to be saying a lot today.
Yeah.
The nice thing about this kid, Cooper DeJean, is that he's super athletic, super athletic. He was a state long jump title winner. He's got that explosiveness. He's really a dense. You mentioned his build. I think it's really, impressive. I think he could play a little bit of safety for you if you needed him to. He can certainly play in the up in the box a little bit. He's a great tackler. He could play, slot coverage for you as a nickel. I've been reading a lot more about Mike Macdonald, the way he wants to construct his defense, and guys like this are perfect examples of who he would want to have on his team. Guys you can move around a little bit and stuff. So and physical guys that can move around.
Physical guys. Like I said, I think Pete Carroll would have loved him because he's great in zone coverage. I don't know. I don't see a lot of press man ability in DeJean. And that's maybe that's me, and I'm misreading this, but that's the one concern I would have with him being in Seattle. And then the last first round grade that you see a lot is going to be Kool-Aid McKinstry. And honestly, this is a guy that He went to Alabama. He's getting an Alabama boost to his draft stock, if you will. I don't see it. He's 4.55, which is on the slow end for a corner. I don't know. You're
His
gonna
pro
have
day,
to.
he ran a 4.47.
Okay, see, I
So
feel better about
he
that.
improved on that. Yeah, he improved.
But at the combine, 4.55, that was really unimpressive. And he just, I don't know. He's one of those more like, he's more of a cover corner guy, but doesn't have the speed to be elite at that. It isn't overly physical in terms of his tackling and things. I don't know. I don't see it.
So a couple things with him. I think that, at Alabama, he kind of took on a leadership role for them. So that's really important. That's a big time program. And he was the leader of that defense, called the plays, make sure everyone was in position, etc. The other thing that he offers too, and we'll talk about this maybe a couple different times today, is returnability. He's got kick returnability. We just talked about that at the top of the show being renewed importance. And so a guy like that might have heightened value for that. But first round, I agree with you. I think he'd probably on most drafts be pushed down into the second round. But he's definitely a talented guy. Super, super good in zone coverage. I just don't know that he's going to be a man guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so those are the guys that I think are ones with first round grades. Is there any name you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's it. That would be it. Rakestraw Jr., Lassiter, all those guys have, they're good. In fact, there's some solid corners in this draft, but I think there's more second round guys. And some of these too, there's only so many draft spots in the first round. And some of these guys are just going to get pushed down a little bit. But
guy I would watch for if Seattle is looking for a corner, which we know they're not, but if they were, would be TJ Tampa. And 6'1", 4.45 as far as speed. So this is a guy that plays physical. He's up on the line of scrimmage, jamming receivers on every play, plays physical, plays tough, comes up, makes plays in the running game as a tackler. He is a McDonald kind of guy. So, yeah.
I agree. No, I agree with that. And I think that he would be available in that 81 range where Seattle has a pick. And not sure how long he sticks around. I mean, he's back into the second round.
Yeah.
Top
I don't think he's going to be there at 80.
Round kind of range.
I think he's going to be off around 60. So
interesting. That's entirely possible. Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible. I agree with that. I think you could be right. You could be right. The other guy I think that they might consider would be Mike Sinistro from Michigan, just because of the connection there. And he's a smaller guy, 182 pounds, 5'9", but he's real shifty, real smart, and intriguing because of the connections there, and kind of his scheme diversity a little bit, both at free safety potentially and corner, work out of the slot, and in nickel coverage, and he'd definitely be a player, special teams contributor, etc. So the only reason I mentioned him specifically is just for that Michigan connection. Mike McDonald's going to be very familiar with him. His special teams coordinator Harbaugh is going to be very familiar. So
yeah, no, I think we shouldn't understate that familiarity. You look at that, it makes sense. I think he's a nickel, he's a slot corner, but the Seahawks, they could use one.
They've got
team could
Kobe
use one.
Bryant essentially.
Yeah, sure they do.
You know, and Witherspoon's going to be there. So you got Witherspoon and Kobe Bryant.
That's what they did last year. Was Witherspoon started on the outside, but when they went to the nickel, he slid in because he has, the pure physical talent to handle, being able to do that. But they had to because he was the only. Right, none of the other guys were nickel corners. They weren't going to be able to come inside where they don't have a boundary to protect them. You're not putting Mike Jackson in there. I mean, I guess you could put you could put Brown in
Trey
there,
Brown,
but he is he's not as equipped to do it as you'd think given his size.
Well,
He's
and Artie
also
Burns played
better.
a little bit of that spot too.
He did, but he's also, and that's again, he's a guy that's better with a boundary, and protecting that. They don't have a great answer, at slot corner, and that's why
true.
I think
and
that's a
Jarek
good
Reed
fit.
may not be ready. We heard that this week as well.
Yep, and honestly, like we'll see if Kobe Bryant makes the team. Like, I think.
Well, that's what we've seen in the past.
He's a bubble guy.
Yeah, that's what's presented itself, so far in his career is he is kind of a bubble guy, and the previous regimes, including Carl Scott, his defensive backs coach, couldn't get what they needed to get out of him, couldn't put him in a position to be successful. Highly touted college player with some limitations, yes, but nonetheless came in with some credentials, and they moved him immediately from an outside corner where he played almost all the snaps in college into that slot, nickel spot, and just didn't really kind of pick it up and moved around couple different positions, ended up at safety and even struggled there. And so you just kind of wonder if he's a positionless player here in the NFL. I'm not sure.
Yeah. If they are looking for a nickel, in that similar range in that, Max Melton out of Rutgers is a name to watch.
Name sounds familiar. We had Bo Melton on the roster for a while.
Oh, is that his brother?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I actually didn't know that. But Max Melton, he's 4'3", so he's got some speed on him. 6 foot or 5'11". But this guy is twitchy as an athlete.
And scheme diverse too, big time.
Yeah, he's 99th percentile in the broad jump, 94th in the vertical. The 4'3", I mean, this is a guy that can do press coverage. He can run, turn and run. He can, play, kind of a deep zone. He can come up and make plays. He plays very physically. I think this is a guy that's going to have a real nice pro career. He's a little on the thin side, but yeah, I'm not going to slice him.
He's almost 190 pounds. I think he's going to be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I think he's a guy that's going to be.
He showed out really well at the Senior Bowl and really impressed at the combine. I understand that he had a great combine, great interviews, etc., rising up some boards. So he could be Frenzy's second round player. I've got him in the third myself, but he's kind of fringy. Could bump up draft boards and kind of get picked off before Seattle has a chance to look.
He's the type of guy that because his skill set and his physical talents say you can play him in the slot, you can play him on the outside, you could play him as a safety in the back end and let him be your center fielder. You can move him around, and there's a lot of value in a guy that's that scheme diverse.
Agreed. Chris Abrams, drained from Missouri, has kind of got the same sort of profile, a little less physical, but if teams like their guys to be really have a lot of agility and be on the ball and play the ball really well, he's a guy that's going to be a great nickel in the league as well. A couple guys that are complete polar opposites of that would be Cam Hart out of Notre Dame and Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, both physical, big corner options.
6'3" and 6'4".
Yeah, you throw those guys back, like especially Cam Hart. You take a look at him, Keith, and you probably did a little bit on tape. 6'3", 202 pounds, runs a 4.50 40. Kind of has that enforcer mentality, if
Both
you will.
of those
He does
guys,
play.
Pete Carroll would have loved them.
Yes, Pete Carroll would have
big,
loved them.
they're physical. They, you can play them in a cover 3, and that length is gonna win, even if their speed doesn't.
Cam Hart had a 39.5-inch vertical, and he had a 130-inch broad, and he's got 33-inch arms, and all that kind of stuff. You're right. Pete would have just been drooling.
Yeah, those guys are definitely Pete Carroll guys. I've been looking for guys like that for the last 14 years, and because that's what Pete Carroll likes. And so going through this, those were the first 2 names that I went to go look at, and I realized, I'm like, okay, this isn't necessarily what they're tough, they're physical, all of those things, but they're not diverse. They're outside only corners, and that's it. They're not playing safety for you. They're not moving inside to the slot. You're not moving them around. You're putting them on, the X receiver on a boundary, and you're letting them, jam them and then turn and run. And that's it. So the lack of scheme diversity there makes me think that's not a target that the Seahawks will go after, given the new defense. But I don't know. I still like them.
I agree.
They're my kind of corners. They're big. They're physical.
They remind you of Treek Woolen a little bit, both of them. And so I'm not sure. We just talked about Woolen.
Treek Woolen's a 4.32, not a 4.50.
Correct. That is true. There's a lot of guys to like, though, in the draft that are really good players. Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Elijah Jones, both running the 4.4s. I think that and offer some scheme diversity. Guy like Jerry Jones is probably going to be available in, say, round 5. A guy like that might be interesting for them to look at.
And he's got some return ability.
Yeah. There's some good guys. Kid from Washington State, Chow Smith Wade is interesting. He's a little slower than I thought. He probably wanted to run in the 4.4s and ended up running a 5.4. So, but I think that's really the key, honestly, is looking for guys that can play, that can be a little multiple, that can play all over the field for you. I think is going to be the key. Maybe some kick return options that they'll be looking at, but you can get those guys, in the 5th, 6th, 7th round usually. Maybe this year there's a premium run on guys like that. We'll see. But I think more or less you're going to be looking in the later rounds for guys that can play, fit your scheme, as well as give you some upside for the future, since we do have some guys on the roster currently. But those guys will transition off the roster as time goes on, and to have somebody there and waiting would be great. Johnny Dixon, Penn State. Josh Wallace, Michigan's another name that's going to be available in the 6th or 7th round. Josh Wallace is going to play special teams for you and kind of be there. They know he's a known quantity. So that's an interesting name for me.
Yeah. And so we're down into the 6th, 7th round.
Yeah.
There's kind of a shelf after Dominic Hampton out of Washington, who I see as like a 5th rounder, and then it's like, oh, we may not see another corner go until round 7. It's just an interesting spot there, because the next guy is probably Tarheeb Still out of Marshall.
You're bringing up some names I don't even have on my list.
I mean, we're talking about a guy that's gonna be, he is a 7th round pick, and it's what I mean. So you're in the shelf range. So I could see there being a run in the early 6th rounds, people trying to get the corner if they want one before there's that shelf, because I think there's going to be a big gap in there.
Mm-hmm. Wow, interesting. Yeah, you take a look at guys that have speed too with some upside, like Demarion Richardson out of Michigan State or Minnesota State, I think is what it is. 6'2", 188 pounds, ran a 4.34. Guys like that track the ball really well, have good ball skills, but just needs some a little bit refinement and so forth, but give you upside maybe on some kick return stuff, special teams for sure. And big guys that you don't know where to put them. Guys like Miles Jones out of Duke, 6'4", 194 pounds, runs a 4.50 40. A guy like that, maybe can he transition into strong safety at some point?
Oh yeah, maybe. But if you're going to try and do that, you need him to put on some weight.
Yes,
he's got the frame, real thin. Yeah,
he's got the frame, right? So I think that's it, man. I mean, I agree with you in the sense that first round is probably not going to happen. Now it could, if they get pushed into a pinch and they're.
We also said it wasn't going to happen last year, and yet, look what they did at the 5th overall pick.
That's right, Keith. And I think that if you're at 16 and you've got almost probably the best players available in 4 or 5 different position groups, and corner could be one of them. That the first corner that we talked about, Quinion Mitchell, I think. Could be sitting there, and he would be kind of a mirror to Witherspoon over on the other side, and I wouldn't hate it. I mean, I'd get the pick. I would understand it. Now, you would have all sorts of people arguing about positional need and other needs on the roster being first and foremost should have been prioritized, but they're picking best player available, and he's their guy on their board. I get it. I understand.
Yeah. My only problem with it would be you put yourself in a situation where you're going to have to pay both guys at the same time. So you're basically picking one and paying them and letting the other one walk, most likely. I'd rather have that set up with a bigger gap between them. So that way, if you pay, let's say you pay Witherspoon and he plays on that big contract for a couple of years, and then maybe you could trade him before you pay the new guy. And so it would be like
those guys are making $22-23 million a year right now.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So if you only want to pay one at a time. And so by having them set up back to back like that, it makes it hard to manage your cap and that kind of stuff. You end up having to let somebody walk. And
it makes way more sense to me to draft a corner in this draft as opposed to picking up somebody in the 7th round or priority free agent. If they pick up additional picks, like if Seattle drops back from 16 to 22, the 22 to 25, 25 to 28, finally makes a pick, but they've picked up 3 day 2 picks doing that, I could see that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think we're going to be probably looking at a guy we've never heard of before.
Yep. Looking at a guy that's in, 5th round, 6th round, in that range that fits the athletic, that fits the athletic profile, but needs to play a lot of special teams and be buried on a depth chart for a year. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So the last show that we're going to do in this series is on
safeties.
At the end of this week, we'll talk about safeties. There's some good safeties in this class. I think it's mostly. I don't think there's a single first round talent at safety.
Yeah.
And there's some good mid round guys, and there's some guys that you kind of want on your team that are good football players, but there's not special. There's no special talent sitting there waiting.
But looking at the scheme and stuff, they'll need for that pure center fielder, that Earl Thomas that made Pete Carroll's system work, isn't as big. Now you need versatile guys. You need multiple Julian Loves, and if you can find that, you're gonna be pretty good. And I think that,
but
those guys
did have
available.
The Ravens did have a special dude, man.
They
did. Kyle Hamilton.
They did have.
He was more of a box safety, but he was more than just a box safety. He's an animal.
He's in everything.
And we don't have one on the roster. If you think Witherspoon could do it now, physically, I think he could do it. He's not going to be the same size, same player, but I think he could do the same job.
Yeah, he could be.
And maybe they've got that, but they don't have they don't have a second guy that could be kind of a rotation piece or a guy that you could do that with. Maybe Mike Jackson a little bit, but who else?
Yeah.
I mean, Julian Love a little bit.
Yeah, so Julian Love. I mean, I think they like Julian Love and his versatility, but they want him to be the versatile player that allows the guy to go do his thing. And there's one guy in this draft that I think can do that. And so we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah. Or you could give me a sneak preview. I mean, I like Tyler Newbin in the first round or Cameron Kitchens, but I don't know if those guys are going to be it.
No, that's the thing is
You found somebody deeper?
No, I mean, it's not much deeper. It's probably the next one on your
Cole
list.
Bishop.
But let's just let this sit. I'm gonna let this sit. We gotta tease this for the people listening. And then they can get us on our next show.
That sounds good. And then after that, we're going to have some fun. We'll do a mock draft again, our second mock draft of the season. We'll talk about the roster, how the roster is currently constructed, where the holes really are, what we think about the roster, and where we think we still need to add. All those conversations will come up. We've got a month, Keith. A month from today, I believe, is the NFL draft. So enjoy the ride, everybody. All right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. This show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our own YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button when you do. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.